Welcome, everyone, to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. I'm going to introduce our topic. I'm going to introduce our guests, and then we'll get into things here. A topic today is a fun one. Beyond the resume database, building talent communities that scale your business. So we're going to talk about how you can leverage communities to really create a talent network, how you can use that to help scale your business, find the right people. Particularly for scaling companies, I find talent is a huge bottleneck. So I'm excited for this conversation and to see what comes up. Introduce our two guests here. First up, Todd Nilsson. He is a co-founder of Clockwork Advisor. Sorry, he's founder of Clockwork Advisors, co-founders of Talent Led. Has over 25 years of experience building communities as a strategist, as a connector, and he specializes in meaningful online communities and digital workplaces for organizations ranging from startups to Fortune 100 companies. He's worked with companies like SAP, Greenpeace, Steelcase, and he's also he's a fractional chief community officer, another CCO. I'll have to remember what the acronym is for. Right? Yeah, and really helping transform their approach to talent through strategic community building. With all that, Todd, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having us on, Bruce.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Next up, I got Elker Akinsel. Sorry, I know I was going to butcher that one.
Perfect. No worries whatsoever on this one. I think you've done brilliantly.
I'm sure you've heard worse, but I'm sure you've heard better. Yeah. And he is a community strategy consultant. He's also a co-founder of Talent Led. He's based out of Cambridge in the UK, and he has worked with companies like Google, Cisco. He's also volunteered for the 2012 London Olympics Games. He's got expertise, entrepreneurial ecosystems, technical communities, topics like the future of work, and he specializes in turning communities into measurable business value across the European region. With all that, welcome to the program.
Fantastic to be here. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you for being here. To our audience, thank you for joining us today. If you're on LinkedIn and you have a question, go ahead and put it in the comments there. We'll watch those comments as we go. We'll try to weave those into the conversation if you have a comment or question. We're also streaming on YouTube. I'm not going to be watching the YouTube comments and questions, however, so if you have a question, jump over to LinkedIn. If you're on either platform, LinkedIn or YouTube or anywhere else we're streaming this, go ahead and leave a comment, and you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave a comment and question there. We'll watch the comments and questions in the coming days and weeks, and we'll try to reply to you there. So even if you're watching the replay, go ahead and engage, and we'll get to you. So with all that, let's kind of start with let's just start with the definition of community, because I think that would be, I think we throw these terms around a lot. What do we mean in this context with community, in terms of kind of definition, grounding things? Todd, well, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, sure. So I love that we're starting with this, because community is one of those much mangled and misused words, in particularly in business or nonprofit contexts. Nobody hates the idea of community. It's a warm blanket. Everybody wants to wrap around them and feel good about. We have a community. We have our customer community. We have a community of friends, that are already invested in our brand or what's there. The work that Ilker and I do as community strategists is often involved with coming in and disabusing companies of the notion that they have a community, following them on TikTok. But that's not a community. That's an on-ramp to maybe bringing people into a sense of community. But if we're talking in digital terms, these are the online spaces where people can come to have deeper interactions than they can in sort of these shallow wading pools of LinkedIn and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. Those are social networks. They are places for high volume, high reach conversations, but they're the fun house. There's like all kinds of little flashing lights in those spaces. The kind of work that Ilker and I are deeply invested in is building spaces where people can connect one-to-one as peers with each other, and not just top down or celebrity out kinds of conversations. And so in a human resources or hiring context, what we're talking about that we think is a pretty original idea is actually bringing your candidates in-house and building a sense of community with them in platforms where they can actually start to feel more invested in the organization.
Yeah. So Ilker, how you want to grade Todd on this one, or what would you change to his definition on this?
Nothing to change. I mean, when in our industry, when Todd speaks, we listen. That's the situation in that regard. But definitely, I mean, with the experience that as strategists collectively we have, we always have to have a good grasp of community as a concept. So what I wanted to add to what Todd has actually said is that when you think about community, especially in certain let's say societies, parts of the world, there are different things that are understood. It's more like something like a sort of a social neighborhood, or like some kind of a gated community, or even some kind of a building where you have a collection of organizations, and then there's this community being led and managed. Of course, these are all communities, but what we talk about here is something different, where, as Todd said, there's a difference between a group of people on some kind of a social media platform, and of course the remaining, what we would think about a community where, people are collectively, connecting with each other and then learning and growing together. This doesn't happen in, let's say, in a social media setting, which is more like an audience, which is more like a channel. So this distinction is very important, and it is a distinction that we, time and time again try to tell, for the reason that we always get confused with being a social media leader, manager kind of thing. So yes, it's true, you do have a collection of people interested in your brand or your service in a social media platform like TikTok or Instagram or wherever. But as Todd is saying, it's a bit of an on-ramp into a more intimate setting where you're actually connecting with other people, than basically just growing as a professional person or whatever. And this is the basis of, as Todd is saying, to our talent community approach, where we just thought that this is a great mechanism to just change the whole concept of employment experience forever, being a candidate, employee, and alumnus. And maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself, but that's very much connected to what we want to say today.
Yeah, no, I like it. What are there? I mean, when you look at the kind of this topic of communities, are there different types of communities, or do you have categories or buckets or kind of archetypes that you look at when you work with organizations around this?
Certainly. And I mean, you'll find different community professionals slicing and dicing them various ways. But I mean, I don't think that it's, I don't think that I would get any kind of strange looks if somebody talked about a community of practice. Where a particular profession is trying to get better at what they do, or trying to bring newcomers into the fold. There are support communities. If you look at a lot of SaaS-based technology platforms have their own support online community, which are designed to deflect help desk tickets and kind of drive innovation for an organization. There are communities of circumstance where people are maybe they have a diagnosis or an addiction of some sort, and they're trying to get help, peer help as well as expert help, for the work that they do. So, to answer your question, there are definitely categories of communities, and often there's some overlap between those communities and what they do and who they serve. That actually is one of the determinants of what makes it a viable community. How uniquely positioned is it, maybe between 2 or 3 archetypes of what's out there. What's interesting that I noticed, we had some people that are signed up for this session who are coming from the HR and hiring world. And I think that many of them may recognize organizations that they are in or have been in, or communities that they belong to with other brands, where there is one of those types of communities. And one of the things that I think, the reason we talk about communities of talent, and Ilker and I have gotten so excited about this over the past few years, is during the pandemic, as he and I were coming together as colleagues on a weekly basis and talking about this, we realized, like the human resources, the talent acquisition world doesn't really think about communities in the same way. If you ask them, what their community pipeline, maybe looks like, they'll say, oh yeah, we've got a pipeline, or we've got here's our database of candidates over here. But that's not a community. Those people aren't talking to each other. There's no connection there. And then I think as we further evolve that idea to think about, we realize, well, maybe it's about those candidates talking to each other, but they're competing in a tight market. So that's not really the community there.
Mm-hmm.
The community is being able to bring talent into your organization after a fashion so that they can start to form relationships, working and personal friendships with the people that they would be working with in your company.
Uh-huh.
And to our knowledge, there's been no effort to build community applications, community spaces for that express purpose of job shadowing, just getting to know an organization, getting involved with the culture and understanding what the culture of that organization is. Because at the end of the day, you want the people who are coming in as candidates to your short list of candidates to be friends of the brand, even if they aren't hired ultimately with that work.
Yeah. And is there is that the kind of the ROI of these communities is recruiting, or like how would you how do you justify or how do you evaluate success?
So think of it this way. So I know Ilker's going to want to talk about this too, but we view the use of communities in the talent journey process in three different ways. There are owned communities possible, both at the acquisition end of the scale, when you're bringing talent into the organization. There's community once people are in the organization. Yeah. And a lot of companies have this covered. They have a social intranet or a collaborative space for their employees. And then at the other end of the talent journey, when somebody exits the organization, there should be some kind of alumni outlet, so you can stay connected with the brand. For people that have spent some period of their careers in a company and that person left on good terms, why wouldn't you want to maintain that relationship? Why wouldn't you want to own that space? So really, there's potentially three types of community platforms that are involved with that process. It maybe could be just one platform, and that's the work that Ilker and I do on a consulting basis, with organizations, helping them to understand how to apply those. With what Ilker and I have been working on with our other co-founder, Rachel, Rachel, who's hello, Rachel, good to see you. Rachel Petzold, who's amazing chief product officer for our organization, came out of Nike and Starbucks. So she knows her stuff. We felt that the real pain point has been on the front end of that experience, acquisition. There's not enough welcoming people into the community of the company to understand that might be happening on an ad hoc basis with your hiring team. I'm not casting shade at recruiting teams, because I'm sure they're doing their level best to bring somebody in and to feel a sense of connection and belonging with it. But we feel that there are ways that the technology can do that in a human way and help to mitigate that early turnover problem where somebody, has gotten an offer to come into the organization. They came in, they realized the culture was not at all what they were sold as a bill of goods, and they leave early. And the cost of that turnover is hard. Minimum $30,000-$40,000 per candidate. And for anybody in the HR world, they know I'm on the conservative side with that number.
Yeah. Okay, I'm curious, how do you kind of develop kind of that ROI model, or what is the return model that you see HR organizations overall, particularly kind of the talent folks inside companies, and what are the things they miss, or what's the shift that they need to make to really see the possibility here when it comes to communities?
Well, fantastic. I think, just Todd's explained it, really, really nicely over there. One of the things I want to roll back to the previous conversation around the definition of community, because I think this is quite important to the listeners, especially those who haven't, sort of professionally looked into the community concept itself. So basically, as a community professional, what we try and do is we try and bridge, the energy and what's actually happening in a community, which most of the time it just happens naturally around the product, service, concept, or anything, into something that is producing both value, still ongoing to produce the value to the members, and also producing value, commercial value to the organization that sponsors it, becomes a partner of it and everything else. So it's a bit of a tightrope to walk, because it's one of the very, very few, let's say, structures where, you're trying to create value for both sides. And especially on the commercial side of things, when you're actually supporting a community, when you're harboring a community, when you are just a growing one as an organization, you try and look for some kind of a return, and that return could be various things, such as extending your support, like Apple does. They have a small team in Ireland supporting millions and millions of devices around the world because they have a huge, community of Apple users that actually post replies to the questions that other users, put in. What happens is that as an ROI, you just keep your team intentionally small, and then you're able to support people with much reduced, let's say, costs, which would otherwise, would cost you, quite a lot of money. So just an example of that. So when you intentionalize and when you basically just, turn the community into a value machine while still keeping it relevant to the members is the thing. And that could be actually the basis that you could think about for our talent communities as well. As an answer to your question, we're talking about, in our model, we're talking about three distinct communities: a community of candidates, employees, and alumni. That is the first thing that we thought it was a bit of a novel thing. It's not really rocket science, but it is something that every organization goes through anyway. So our talent actually just comes in one way. When a candidate gets a job, they don't become a super person. They just become a person with a job. They just become an employee. And then basically when they leave an organization, they take this experience with them all, like for eternity, to be honest with you. It's going to be something indelible that actually just, goes with them across. So what we try to do is we try to place an ROI opportunity for each one of these communities, both for the person and the actual organization that supports this talent community as well. For the candidate community, what we thought that the community is a perfect ground to let's say, support, prepare, orientate the talent, even without a prospect of a job. What happens is that, in a community, you're able to interact with the talent, even without nothing happening in reality that could be of value to them. But what you're doing is that A, you're supporting them as a professional, and B, when the requirement comes in the organization, then your time to hire is near zero because the talent is already ready. So that's like the first ROI. On the employee side of things, the biggest problem is the retention, just people just leaving the organization. And then, of course, managing attrition as well, the natural way of just organizing people leaving the organization. So on our employee community value offering, what we do is that we are providing the safe space for the employees to be able to tell the organization what their expectations are. Your biggest problem is you join an organization, it just doesn't live up to your expectations. It's a bit of a theater, and you just join somewhere where it's not really what you envisaged it to be. So a community model is a great way to manage that, is to in a much better way for both sides. So imagine this community being able to help conversations in such a way that the expectations are managed on both sides. And on the alumni side of things, the third leg of our model, it's an untapped resource, which blows our mind as to why not many organizations have an official alumni community. Because A, just like Todd and I in our backgrounds, we've both been what we call boomerang employees. We've been to an organization and then we went back to it. And it's a great source for that. So if you have a good relationship with your talents, and then when they leave, you're actually supporting them in a community manner, then they become your lifelong advocates. They send you new talent, they send you new candidates, and ultimately, when they want to do something on their own, which is such a thing these days, starting your own startup or your supplying organization, the first organization they turn to is you, because they know how you work and they know what the problems are. So they become your extension, your supplier. These are huge ROIs that people seem to forget in the transactional mechanism of standard, hiring structure, which doesn't really take account of this because it was coined 100 years ago. So this is what we're trying to solve with the community approach.
I call it the McKinsey strategy, which is, they were notorious. Like you join McKinsey, you're in there for a couple of years, and then you don't make partners, so you go off and you leave and you become a CEO of a company, and then what do? You hire McKinsey, right? So so this whole idea of like, if you turn your your employees into your future customers, right? Get them out into the market, and then they hire you to do the next phase. So let's talk about what it actually takes to build that community, because I think conceptually I get it. I think we're starting to see the ROI for both sides, right? There's opportunities here, but I do find I'm involved with several communities that are basically, they put me onto a WhatsApp group, and I'm getting, I've got one group that I think is 250 messages a day, and I have it muted, and I never really check it because it's way overwhelming. Like, so what does it actually mean to kind of structure, to kind of put together a community that's going to have impact, that people are engaging with, that actually is delivering on the value that we're trying to do here? Todd, why don't you give us your take on what does it mean to actually put together these communities? What do they do?
Yeah. So if you've ever been in an online community, and most of us have, in one shape or form, whether it was a Slack or a Discord or a Circle, community, like many of us have run into these smaller community spaces over time. Like you said, you're used to joining that space, and there's like a glut of messages, and and depending on how well defined that onboarding process is, it can be overwhelming, or it can be a ghost town, and you can go in and say, look, I don't really care about this so much. With what Ilker was talking about with a community of talent for job seekers themselves, that's really kind of a community of practice, where it's sharing best ideas and approaches. These things exist in the wild, and it's a matter of decision whether a given enterprise wants to host that themselves, or to maybe support a community practice around those things. So Talent-Led itself is going to be launching, a space like that, and that's really just about leveling up your job search and affecting the mindset, affecting how you're going to market, affecting how you're finding opportunities, how you're interviewing, how you're accepting jobs, and going into a new workplace situation. The piece that we're doing that we think is a little more unique with that process is, we're saying, like, that's not actually the community that we're talking about getting you into with a given employer. If we're architecting that experience for an employer, that's about bringing you as one of the shortlisted candidates into a one-to-many experience with one or more people that you'll be working with in the work group where you'll be. That will be your community. That's your local neighborhood. You may end up talking to some other people in that space. So this is really almost like, it is almost like getting invited into like a smaller WhatsApp group, where you're being greeted, you're being asked maybe some questions about your work preference. So there's some level of validated assessment that we would want to build into that, so that from a HR perspective, that you're getting some kind of understanding of the values of the person that you're looking to hire. They're not to cut them out of the process, but to just make sure that they're going to be a good fit culturally for the group that you want them to be with. And then having opportunities for both asynchronous as well as direct conversation with a buddy in that work group. Like, this is the person who's going to be your mentor or your guide coming into the company, and have that opportunity to really understand what it is to be a part of that company experience, and why they would want to be aboard. Because ideally, we want them to, when they get hired into the organization, be walking into a familiar situation. Hey, I know who the people are in that department. I know the work they're doing. I've met a couple of other people around the business, and it's less formal than that interview process that they've had to go through with multiple video interviews or in-person interviews, or doing like a formal presentation tryout. I think a lot of companies right now are they're in various levels of pain and dysfunction because of the tightness of hiring requirements and fear of making a bad hire. So it's not uncommon for me to hear anecdotally about companies doing 6, 7, 10, 12 interviews, just ridiculous numbers of interviews. And you know what? Like, that's like inviting somebody out to a date in a French restaurant 12 times because you want to see if you want to marry them. Like, it's not a tenable way to run your hiring process to do it. We feel that building in an app experience where there's the opportunity for less formal Q&A back and forth, something a little more asynchronous, is an opportunity to get to know the company better, and for the company to get to know you better as a potential hire.
Ilker, what would you add to that, or where do you see kind of the opportunity to create value, or actually make this process work?
Well, Todd's explained it really eloquently there. It's wonderful. So one of the things that I wanted to conceptually add as some kind of a denominator to this is that, community is this artificial thing that we are creating.
Yeah.
When you look at it like this, it's like, we can shape it the way that we basically want. And this is where we come in, people like Todd and I, and in terms of, providing community strategy, talent, and also otherwise. So one of the things that we try and do as a missing link in many organizations is like, when you're talking about the talent and recruitment and talent leadership processes, actually not two jobs or specializations or two companies are the same. So it's important to understand your members and what does the job entail. Just to give you an example on this one, when you talk about developer communities, a lot of people think, in order to find high quality developers, what you do is that you just put together a job description and a requirement with a lot of with a big salary, good name and everything, lots of benefits and everything. But to be very honest with you, having worked with developers for many years, it's not what makes them tick. What developer is an artist, is someone who actually wants to solve problems, is a hugely talented engineer. And one of the best ways, for example, to attract the best employees, to be open about your technical changes, challenges, and your roadmaps.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine, this is a proven strategy where if you had an internal or an external blog, which is what we actually embed in our talent community setting, where you're talking about your platform changes, the technical problems that you want solving, and other things. This is where people get really interested and invested in your organizations. I saw so many candidates just refusing higher paying jobs because another job that they were more interested was actually around the perfect, let's say, skill or the transformation journey that they wanted to be part of.
Yeah.
So this actually, you can take this and then replicate it in, or just change it in, or apply it, in many different jurisdictions. Like, for example, sales. It's hugely traditional, but especially with AI, people are very concerned, and what they want is like better skills. They want to understand more about AI and how they can actually wrap their, let's say, skills and expertise and finesse of selling around it. So imagine if you built a community just focused on that, and then engineered and then started and then just poked the members around with intriguing content, questions, and the new trends around this. That's where the community started. So just to give you maybe like a one sentence answer to what you just said. Imagine if you joined the community and then the conversations were in such a way where you just felt, this is the community I've been looking for for years, for some time, or whatever. This is what we engineer, and in the talent world, this is a huge advantage that we can actually weave into the recruitment and organizational buying process.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from each one of you, just kind of one question you would suggest that kind of directors of talent or people that are in charge of talent inside these organizations, things they should ask themselves around this community in terms of helping them figure out the path they should go down or where they should start on this, because we're talking about several different possible communities you could do. Like where would you suggest they start, or what's the question they need to ask to kind of figure out where they should start on this? Todd, I would love to.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it has to start with a clear-eyed question about where your pain is in the process. Is it a turnover issue? Is it a retention issue? Mm-hmm. Is it a boomerang hire issue? That would have a lot to do with where I would want to begin by focusing my efforts and thinking about what kinds of experiences your talent in your organization is experiencing in each of those stages.
Yeah. Ilkar, on your side, what would you say people need to ask themselves?
Well, I mean, one of the things that, but immediately just made me think. So the world is changing. This is something that we've been talking for some time now, and it has come to its own for quite recently. So especially with AI, with candidates using AI in applications and everything, it's a paradigm shift. It's a new world now where AI is grading AI on on both ends, and there are candidates and there are jobs and there are like all sorts of processes that doesn't exist. So the organization must ask, we're in a different new world, and am I ready, or am I really looking forward to a new way of talent leadership? So community is just one way of this, but certainly the organizations that will stop using yesteryear's methodologies using CVs, resumes, and applications, and hoping that somebody comes in with the great skills, and then they just want to do something proactively about it. Are they ready to this? Are they ready to explore it? And this is a great, let's say, first step towards the awareness, and then the path towards a new way of leadership, which in our case and in our world, it involves community.
Yeah. Amazing. I want to make sure we get contact information out there. If people want to find out about what you're each doing and kind of the work and more information on kind of how you approach this, what's the best way to get that information? Todd, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm extremely active on LinkedIn, so that's a wonderful way to reach out and connect with me. Or you can find out about what we're doing with Talent Led by going to talentled.co. That's our site there. So yeah, those are probably the two fastest ways to learn a little bit more.
Great. Okay, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Same thing. LinkedIn is where I live, and that's why we're actually holding this on LinkedIn. Amongst other platforms. I mean, not to say anything about the other platforms or anything, but LinkedIn is a wonderful place. But same with. I'll just repeat what Todd said. So talentled.co is our website, and actually, there are lots of interesting contact opportunities that we're providing on that website, including the ability to set an introductory call with us. So if they really want to, if somebody's really interested about this, they can reach out, connect with both of us, or just use the information that we actually have on the contact us page there.
Awesome. Great. If anyone wants to get a hold of me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com is email, eckfeldt.com is URL. And yes, of course, LinkedIn. Lots of LinkedIn connections here. But okay, Todd, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Bruce.
Many thanks.
Thanks for everyone for listening. Again, if you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave comments and questions there. We'll watch those in the coming days and weeks. And we'll see you at the next LinkedIn Live. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.